features of humankind. This quote by archaeologist Stephen Mithun from his book, The Singing Neanderthals, The Origin of Music, Language, Mind, and Body, is a good reminder to all of us studying music that we are privileged to be able to access this mystery. In my case, the study and practice of improvisation has led me on a very mysterious and wonderful journey, and I hope to share with you some of what I have found. So when I mention that I'm working on opera and improvisation, sometimes I get confused looks and sometimes I get some questions, such as, what do opera and improvisation have to do with each other? Can you really improvise an opera? Are there people currently doing this? And what does it sound like? So I hope we can answer some of those things and get a better understanding of this exciting trend. So today I hope to demonstrate that improvisation and opera do go together and have enormous potential for continued exploration. First, I'll present some examples of contemporary trends in vocal and operatic improvisation, and then discuss some parameters and methods I've studied, and conclude by showing some video of some experiments in the genre. I guess that's okay. I could probably make that. Yeah, that's better. So the two types of contemporary operatic improvisation I'll discuss are improv comedy opera. I have two examples of that to show you. And then something I'm calling devised opera. And if you don't know what that means, I will explain that shortly. I'm going to be showing 4 different examples. The late 20th and early 21st century saw the formation of several groups of performers using improvisation to create operas. And this happened not so much as a reaction against traditional composed opera, but as an addition to it, a way to incorporate more influences from the theater, and also in some cases a way to market operatic singing to people who might not be your normal opera audience or might be unfamiliar with the genre. Now, for the most part, the singers participating in this have been trained in traditional opera singing. But with diverse influences, including experimental music, devised theater, improv comedy, and educational theory, the new operatic improvisations fall into 2 basic categories. I had to divide them up somehow. So there are some that have the improv comedy model and some that are more closely linked to devised theater. So first, improv comedy opera. This company called Impropera is based in London. And according to their website, they bill themselves as the world's only improvising opera company, which isn't quite true, but they are probably one of the few. And they recently performed in the British Museum. They're doing quite well for themselves in London. And artistic director David Pearl and a cast of singers and instrumentalists follow an improv comedy model with operatic and classical music. They use audience member suggestions for story elements and compositional styles. This performance was filmed in 2009 at the Tête-à-Tête Opera Festival. And the second act of their show consists of an improvised long-form opera called The Preposterous Market Gardener of Belfast. Now, how did they get this? Because the audience got to shout out an adjective, which was preposterous. They got to choose a profession, which turned out to be market gardener, and then they chose a location, which was Belfast. So the improvising singers and instrumentalists had that to work with, and what we're going to see here is a short, and also the audience suggested the following composers: Beethoven, Poulenc, Dvorak, Handel, Elgar, Wagner, and Puccini. So to improvise in the styles of all those composers. Now, I'm not sure they succeeded in all of that, but you might hear a couple of little riffs or quotes from some of those composers in this brief excerpt. In this case, what's going on is the gardener is singing an aria about apples and pears. He would like to sell more exotic fruit, but people only want apples and pears. And then he gets some good news. We'll watch a bit of this.
I'll pack away my stock. You're such a fool. Apples and pears will have to do. it Mr. Parkinson? You know me then? Yes, I'm so glad. No, the news is that's just in. A circus troupe of Peruvian performers has arrived in the docks where the Titanic was built. And so they call an exotic boot to meet. Oh, they can't perform tonight in the big top that rises yonder on the skyline above the big cranes whose names I've forgotten. Golden Wolf, I believe that's the one, Goliath and another one. Anyway, they need exotic fruit to fly their trapeze. As we say in Ulster, that's wonderful news.
Now they get to improvise an ensemble.
Wonderful news. Wonderful news.
We're playing with some parts also. On the spot. It's a great skill to have. So the next one I'm going to show you is a duo called La Donna Improvvisata, which is a New York-based duo consisting of soprano Lisa Flanagan and pianist Craig Spitznagel. Now, like Impropera, they base their performances around parameters suggested by the audience. In this case, she asked the audience to pick a type of archetypal character. You can't read them, but on the wall there are things like servant, mother, trickster, priestess, things like that, and to pick an adjective. In this case, they picked the hollow trickster. Now, how is she going to show hollow? Well, in this case, hollow means that this poor trickster has run out of town to the city and has not brought any money or any food. So first thing he has to do is to get some food, fill his stomach. Now this you'll notice, although Lisa Flanagan is an operatic soprano, she's performed Tosca in addition to other roles, this is going to sound a little more like musical theater. Now she's improvising this, the pianist is improvising on the spot, including rhyming lyrics. She plays all the characters, so sometimes she sings duets with herself as male and female characters. So in this excerpt, the trickster has just come into town with no money, and let's see what happens next. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Let's go back. Here we go.
Something
there's a romance that develops between those two characters. Just about everything I'm going to show you, I should note, is also available on YouTube or Vimeo. And at the end, I'll give you my email address. If anybody wants to see more of this, I can let you know where to find it. So moving on to devised opera. Now, I was trying to come up with a name for the other type of improvised opera that I found during my research. And I chose devised opera because it relies not on audience choices, but on collaboration between artists, including playwrights, directors, singers, and instrumentalists. Now, I call it devised opera because it's more closely linked to devised theater. Now, the term devised theater is typically applied to productions in which the text or narrative is developed collaboratively with the performers rather than by a single playwright. In the case of the operas I'll describe, we do have some where the text has been written by a single playwright, but the music is devised. The music is not that one composer wrote the music and performers get up and do it. The music is devised through improvisation of the performers. So the first example I'm going to show you of this style is the work of pianist and vocal coach Ann Baltz and some other folks. Now, since 1987, Ann Baltz has been using improvisation as an educational tool to get singers in touch with their own instincts as performers. It's a central part of the curriculum of the Opera Works training program for both emerging and advanced singers. Now, I should note that as of this August, Ann Baltz is no longer director of Opera Works. She is still working on this, but she is now doing that independently of Opera Works. This opera, The Discord Altar, was performed in 2015 at the Secret Rose Theater in Hollywood. And it was a collaboration between Ann Baltz as music director, playwright Megan Brown, and director Amanda McRaven. And Ann Baltz kindly made video footage available to me of multiple performances so I could research and write about that and see that every time it was completely different. There were no arias that ever sounded the same way twice. This aria, however, you can see on YouTube. The opera concerns a group of homeless people gathered to memorialize a man who has recently died. And over the course of the opera, they share stories about their past and current situations. Now, this was part of an art for social awareness movement to draw attention to the problem of homelessness, and the playwright talked to homeless veterans, talked to people in homeless shelters to generate some of the content. In this case, what we will see is a bit of the character Richie's aria. Richie here performed by mezzo-soprano Julia Axe, and Richie is a young transgender man who is homeless. So they always had the same words. They had their blocking given to them by the director, but the music was completely different every time. Now the next thing I'm going to show you is a bit of a different approach to what I'm calling devised opera by composer Ellen Lindquist, who takes a more controlled approach in a piece called Dream Seminar, which is a bilingual English and Swedish piece based on the poetry of Thomas Tranströmer, a Swedish poet. This was devised by the New York-based company Companion Star, which according to their website, quote, is dedicated to the growth of music theater by challenging theater's traditional relationships, cultivating diverse artists, and introducing new works to the public in dynamic and interactive environments. So here we have a group of singers and instrumentalists and composer all collaborating together. And this is a bit of a documentary about their process.
Here we have a process that's not just everybody interpreting a finished product, but everybody developing and creating it at the same time.
Adding movement and allowing especially the instrumentalists who are so often, in a pit below the stage, not visible to the audience, really allowing them to come out as soloists and as characters in their own right.
Having had a lot of experience in classical music and knowing a lot of groups and things that are occurring in the 21st century, I don't think that there's many groups that are doing what we're doing.
The atmosphere that's been created around this project is that, let's try it. Anything goes. If it doesn't work, fine, but let's at least try it first. And that also is really unusual.
It's all about being able to accept everyone as a true artist in their own right and allowing them to find the space to speak what their ideas are. That's what Companion Star is.
There's a lot more about this. This is also a very interesting process and way to collaborate between singers and instrumentalists. So moving on to some methods and parameters I've studied, and this is by no means exhaustive. Improvisation, just by its very nature, there really are no rules unless you make rules. And there are so many different possible ways to do improvisation as singers. And some of the ones I will mention: contact improvisation in dance was how I got started. Free vocal improvisation, which is what I worked on with Ann Volz and some other folks. Theater improv games I'm not really going to get into today because we don't have enough time for that. Collaborative improvisation with musicians and dancers based on more experimental kind of musical forms, and some harmonic methods. For instance, jazz is a harmonic method because you improvise around certain harmonic progressions or scales. So those are just some possible improvisation methods. So first of all, contact improv in dance, which is a lot of fun. I've got some of my students here in my opera class, and I've made them do this a little bit. In 2009 was when my journey started with improvisation. I was accepted as a participant in something called the Indie Convergence, which is a multidisciplinary arts residency in Indianapolis. And the idea is that artists from all different disciplines come together, teach workshops to each other, work on your own projects, work on one big project together, and just play and experiment, be creative, and learn things. So naturally, the dancers taught some dance workshops to the rest of us. And what they taught us was contact improv, where you literally share weight with another person and move across the space using a shared center of gravity. And you move together in patterns where you're actually in physical contact, oftentimes with other people. I loved it. This was great. I'm not a very good dancer, and I'm really nervous about learning choreography because I have 2 feet, so I have a 50% chance of getting it wrong. And when you're doing improvisation, there is no right and wrong. And if some dancer did some really wonderful movement, all I have to do is put my arm up and maybe support their back, and I was improvising with them. So I loved it. It was so much fun. And then I tried to teach singing to the dancers and actors, and they all clammed up and they got so afraid. What if I hit a wrong note? And I couldn't imagine why it was so scary for them. And then I thought, what if I can find a way to make singing as accessible and fun and easy for them as they made dance to me through contact improvisation? So I started working on how do you translate the ideas from contact improvisation to singing, which I worked on, but I'm not going to get into all the nitty-gritty of that. We're going to fast forward a few years. I did teach some vocal improvisation, and this year in 2012, let's see, 2010 I taught a experimental vocal improv workshop for the first time. Then in 2012 there was a dancer who did a contact improv dance workshop. Then I did a vocal improv workshop. We combined the two and it looked something like this. Now most of the people you see are either professional dancers or actors. We do have one professional musician in the group there. Whoops, I didn't click the right place. Here we go. So we took turns, one group and the other group vocalized. You get different sounds. If you have mostly actors and dancers, you're going to get different sounds. Or if you have trained singers, if you have middle school kids, I've done it with them, you get all kinds of funny sounds. At one point, somebody decided to cluck like a chicken, and then nobody could keep a straight face because they were all laughing too hard. So you just never know what's going to come out, which is part of the fun of it. So one thing I learned when I worked with Ann Waltz, she does a lot of different improvisation techniques, and one of them is these a cappella trios where three singers will sit on chairs with their eyes closed. She prefers the singers hold hands, and there are absolutely no rules. It's just close your eyes, listen to each other, and sing. And I'm going to let, in this video, Ann Waltz tell you a little bit about why she thinks this is important.
Okay, so improv is my favorite class because it is where you all get to sing your music, not music that are little dots on a page that someone else has coached and taught you and you've practiced to death and thought about it, taken every class in the world. No, this is music that you don't even know exists yet because it doesn't until you open your mouth and create it. So what I love about improv is that
I'm going to fast forward a little so you can see this in action. She has some singers. Okay, here we go. Together, and it can work very, very well. Then when I was working on my doctorate at the University of Illinois, I was very fortunate to work with some great singers, actually instrumentalists and dancers in some improv groups. I took a class called Collab, which was collaborative improvisation between musicians, dancers, and engineers. And I'm going to introduce you in this video to a few people I worked with during that. Now, in this case, these are harmonic methods, so maybe there are some decisions. The score is not a written score with notes, but the score is these two instrumentalists will improvise, then these two will take over, maybe we'll have some particular intervals we'll stress, or a particular mood.
I'm an improviser.
Hi, my name is Yuchen Wang, and I'm a guzheng player.
Armin Boat, I'm a bass player and a mechanical engineer.
I'm Morgan Powell, a trombonist,
Composer?
The name of the band, Compost Q. Well, we all like to compost, you know, our vegetables and coffee grounds and eggshells.
To pause it there, Eric Lund here was my advisor for my doctoral project. Dorothy Martirano, you'll see later, playing violin in a piece that I directed. And Kirsty Simpson, the dancer, I got to take a whole semester of contact improv from her, and that was great. I'm going to fast forward so you can hear these folks improvising together because they are really, really good. Improvisation using some different harmonic methods, including some improvisation games. And I'm going to skip ahead to Adam Rudolph, who I also was fortunate to work with. He is a jazz conductor, composer, and percussionist. But jazz may be in a larger sense because a lot of this doesn't sound like traditional jazz at all necessarily. He did a residency at the University of Illinois while I was there, and we had several days of workshops in which we learned these different matrices like what you see here. And when we were doing an improvisation with him, it's a whole orchestra. He calls it the Go Organic Orchestra. And I'm going to show you a little bit of video of that shortly. But you would have to practice these matrices and learn how to sing or play D, F, G, A, C. Then he would, it's got a number 5 on there. So he would conduct with hand symbols. He'd hold up a number 5 and do his hand across like that. And what that meant was you either start on a D, B, A, G flat, E, or D, and you do that scale across as he conducts it. And then maybe he'll point to somebody and have them improvise over top of that. So what I learned from this is you can actually improvise with a very large group of people, an entire orchestra. But the more people you have improvising, the more rules you have to have, otherwise it could get extremely chaotic. So let's see what that looks like. You will see me in this video. In this particular excerpt, I'm not singing, but he gave me some text by Nietzsche that he would point to me, give me a number, and I would sing that text in kind of a recitative-like manner, improvising over the instrumental things going on.
Century vision of an orchestra. What I'm hoping to accomplish is to allow each musician to be able to express themselves let their inner voice come through, express their feelings, but at the same time serve the overall moment and the collective expression of what we're doing.
This is one of those arranger scenes where you have a particular pitch class set, a particular order as he conducts it.
I'm of the belief that creative activity and the cultivation.
So you can obviously combine these methods. Again, it's a really great way to be creative, and what can you learn from one thing and then combine it with something else. You can improvise freely, or you can improvise with some musical parameters. You can say, we're going to use a homophonic texture or polyphonic texture. We're going to use a particular scale or pitch class set. We're going to improvise around the idea of a particular interval. Or you can give your improvisers tasks to do. During this improvisation, you're going to make sure that you lead as well as follow. Or you're going to make sure that you do an opposite texture from what you hear somebody else doing. So that's one way to do it. You can also have non-musical parameters. You might tell them to improvise around a particular mood, an image, a landscape, an event, or even an object. Now, I once did an improvisation with improvised text and music in the workshop with Ann Baltz that was around a tube of toothpaste and a shoe. And it was pretty crazy, but it was fun. So just to show you what a non-musical parameter might look like, this is a workshop that I taught at Georgia College in 2017. These are all voice majors. And what I had them do is very similar to what Ann Baltz has the singers do, with the exception that I gave them all some kind of parameter to work with. In this case, I said, sing me a sunrise on an alien planet. And this is what that sounds like. It's not falling sound. Texas A&M Corpus Christi, we collect to collaborate between the theater and dance department, improv group, and our opera workshop, and do some things together. We got a couple people in the audience that are in this one. I'm going to show just the tail end of it, where their task was to move and sing together in 3 small groups and then come together as one. We'll just watch the tail end of this clip. accident or by listening to each other really well. So last thing I'm going to show you, for my doctoral project, I wrote and directed an opera about 20 minutes in length called Homo Homoris, which is basically made-up Latin for a man who's half lobster. Now, the story was based on a story that I wrote that was published in Daily Science Fiction magazine, and it's kind of a gender flip on the Little Mermaid story, but not the happy Disney version. The Hans Christian Andersen version has a sad ending, as this does. So I have a group of instrumentalists and singers here who are working together based on, we worked together for about 14 hours total. And they're looking at just a sheet of paper with text on it. There's no musical score. They just have the text, which was memorized by the one singer, and they have that divided up into events. I read The Director's Craft by Katie Mitchell, an opera director whose work I really admire, and divided the script up into events. An event happens when something changes for a character. So between here to here, maybe I would tell them play foreboding. And then from here to here, play angry. And I did not give them any musical parameters. It was all non-musical, where I would tell them, this thing happens when this character stumbles, I need an instrumental response to that. And I just backed off and let them do whatever they wanted to do, and I was fortunate to have professional musicians and doctoral students who were excellent improvisers and listeners to each other. So we're going to hear some few excerpts of that. Whoops, that's not what I want to do. Okay. It's been an overture. I had an ensemble of trombone, trumpet, violin, harp, piano, electronics, and singers. So long story short, she sends him away because he's just not very happy as a human. back to the ocean, he couldn't swim, and he drowned. So, sad story. I've directed some other improvised operas that are a little more humorous and lighthearted than this. But what I want to leave you with, since I'm almost out of time here, is, so why do we do this? Why improvise? I think it's a great way to create fresh, vibrant works that are different every time. Don't get hung up on creating that one beautiful moment. Get hung up on creating repeated beautiful moments that you can't even predict, and they just are hopefully going to happen. You also can, at least in theory, go more quickly from idea to product. If you have to learn a very complicated rhythmic atonal score, it can be very challenging. You have to spend a lot of time memorizing the music. If you just have to memorize the text and you're blocking and can improvise the music, and you're good enough at listening to each other, which, by the way, improvisation is a skill. So the more you do it, the better you get. You can start from zero and get better and better, because as you improvise, you develop listening skills. You have to be able to listen to improvise. Also, improvisation allows people with different levels of ability and musical experience to work together. And finally, it's a great way to have fun. So in conclusion, I believe that opera and improvisation are a natural pairing. It's not only possible to improvise an opera, there are multiple ways to do so, including several I probably haven't even, some of you haven't even thought up yet. Some of you maybe will think about it. And there are several companies and individuals currently using improvisation in opera, and improvised opera has enormous potential for continued exploration. So again, you can email me if you want more information about any of these resources, or where to find more information, or you want to watch the entirety of some of those videos that I showed you little snippets of. But I would like to conclude with having you all do what Pauline Oliveros, a great improviser who recently has passed away, calls a sonic meditation. So I'm going to invite all of you to close your eyes, and when you feel ready, just hum or sing a note very simply. As you start to run out of breath, go ahead and take a breath and come back in. But when you come back in, see if you can sing or hum a different pitch that maybe you have heard around you. And we'll just continue that for a minute or two until it stops organically on its own. So thanks so much for coming. If you have questions, want to know more, feel free to email me. This is my favorite subject. I'm happy to talk more.